A lot of the objective risks in ski touring are like your avalanche risk, there's the weather, there's the type of terrain that you're going into, and all of them combined create, a level of uncertainty that you're never going to be able to eliminate. And so an effect on the weather and the snowpack is going to be something that we need to consider. And then also the type of terrain. So like it's sort of like looking at all. I'm sorry, do you want me to stop?
No, we're just gonna. Whenever you're ready.
All right. My name is Madeline, and I was born in Nelson, BC, and now I'm living in Revelstoke. I work as a ski guide in the winter and as a hiking guide in the summertime, and I also work for the training and assessment program as an instructor and examiner. I grew up skiing and was very fortunate to have a family that supported that, as well as cross-country skiing. I really loved how it made me feel to be kind of connecting with something a lot bigger than myself. And I followed that seed through a lot of different avenues of not only trying to develop my own skills, but then seeking out those opportunities to share whatever experience I had with others. I started working with schools, and so I had some opportunities through previous teachers where they were doing some outdoor programs in the Kootenays, and they'd asked if I wanted to come in kind of for an honorarium and help out with like a canoeing course or a backpacking course. And then working for Outward Bound was really where I think the instructional aspect became a little more cemented, with a little more mentorship and direction in terms of how to better facilitate experiences. I had just such a thirst for learning, and knowing that a lot of guides are so technically proficient and they're really dedicated to their craft, that I decided I wanted to try to make some of those connections. The mentor, like the guide that I was working with, had a philosophy of like a guide isn't someone that you're just following in the mountains and that's telling you what to do. Like a guide is a coach. A guide is someone who is helping people reach their potential and helps work with people to build their skills so that you can continue to do like even cooler things with them. And that sort of mentality of a guide being much more than someone that you just follow really resonated. And so that was a real gift to have that opportunity to see that guiding was a lot more than what I had originally understood or believed, and then continue to follow that path. Yeah, so probably the biggest risk that we're managing while ski touring is the risk of avalanches. And so avalanches are created when you have different layers in the snowpack, and some of which don't bond together as well as others. And then when you involve a slope of an angle of 28 degrees or more, the chance of triggering an avalanche is quite high. And they can be triggered by people, they can be triggered by weather events, they can be triggered by animals even. And so that is probably the number one concern and risk that I'm managing consistently and constantly throughout the day. So a group of friends and I were at a cabin in the southern Selkirks. We were going to be there for about 5 days. We had come in the day before and we had sort of ski toured around. We'd looked at the forecast, the avalanche hazard forecast for the time we were going to be there. It was at moderate at that time for alpine and below tree line. And we skied around. We did a bunch of snowpack tests and we were pretty happy with the results that we'd found, thinking that things were like more stable than we had anticipated based on the several tests we'd done. The following day was the best weather window, so kind of more blue skies and not a lot of wind, and temperatures were relatively stable. And so we thought, okay, if we want to make the most of this day, then let's do kind of a bigger circuit. And we started out walking up a ridge, and we were going to ski this kind of bit of a steeper face as our kind of first run. We got to the top, and because I was a little concerned about things heating up during the day because it was March, I decided to kind of start skiing before everyone had arrived at the skins off point. I think I had like kind of an uneasy feeling just because it was a bit of a bigger feature, and I certainly don't consider myself like a steep skier, but there was that hesitation of like anytime you're doing something a little different, there's a bit of like nervous excitement and anticipation. And so that was the feeling I was really experiencing at the beginning. And as soon as I kind of just started skiing, which is a natural feeling for me, my emotions kind of just started like becoming a little more regulated. And then in terms of what I felt that was different, I can't even say what it was, whether it was like a whoomp or a sound or a sensation, but it just, something was different, and I happened to look up and see the crack. I felt ashamed. I felt like I had made the worst decision that I could have, like just knowing that the decision I'd made was wrong because now I was experiencing this outcome. And I felt like I was, just like letting down my entire community, the whole group of, trying to have done everything right and like still totally f***ed it up. And that was, so there was like it wasn't fear at first so much as disappointment almost. And that was, really an interesting realization. And then as I was moving down, almost just like this surrender of like, there's really nothing I can do at this point. And all the kind of information about, you have to swim or like try to fight the avalanche was just like completely thrown out the window. There was nothing, like I couldn't really move. My backpack got ripped off of me, like my skis, I didn't know where they were either. And that was, it was pretty obvious I wasn't gonna be able to like physically get myself out of this situation. And so I remember kind of just thinking, you know what, I've lived a pretty good life so far, and if this is the way I go, then this is the way I go. And ended up getting wrapped around a tree, and the snow kept washing over me. And then when it started slowing, I was able to like lift my head up and realize that I wasn't buried, which was really amazing. But I had broken my leg really badly. And so that was, kind of the moment that I realized I was alive, but not necessarily in a super good condition. I think the feeling of shame really gets triggered when we have an expectation of ourselves or a perceived expectation that others have of us, and we're not meeting it for whatever reason. At least that's been my experience. And also the kind of thought that like we should have known, or we should be able to control an outcome, or we should XYZ. And so the feeling of shame was really around like, I don't have what it takes to kind of like be in these places because obviously I can't make good decisions if this is the outcome. It's hard to reconcile that even when you think you've done everything right and you've had the worst outcome. It's really hard to understand kind of where to start again. I think understanding the difference between guilt and shame is really important, because guilt is like, I've done something wrong, I can learn and I can keep progressing and move forward. Whereas shame is like, I am wrong or I don't belong, and nothing I do is going to change that. And in our community, when we are constantly questioning other people's decisions, at a certain point it's going to become or feel very personal, that you're not just questioning a decision, you're kind of questioning who they are and their right to belong in the community. Fortunately, my friend community was really supportive, and like even if some of them were questioning the decision or why we were there, what was going on, there was support to kind of redirect some of that questioning to like, let's learn from it, but let's not be pointing the finger. And even after the incident, I felt really strongly that it was important to share what had happened, because to me, the idea of having this incident help others learn was more important than protecting my sense of like shame or identity or reputation. I didn't really seek out stories, but it kind of felt like people sought me out to share their stories. And by having shared like my own vulnerability, it almost invited this opportunity for other folks to come to me and say like, yeah, I had a similar experience. And it wasn't that we necessarily had to talk about details or decisions, but almost just that recognition of like, wow, we've both been hurt or kind of traumatized in a similar way, and here we are moving through it in our own ways. I had mental health support immediately because those supports were already in place. And that was, I think, a very different situation to some of the folks that did come forward and speak to me, because it was, if they weren't injured, they kind of were expected to get right back out there, or if they were injured, they kind of focused maybe more on the physical healing, and the mental health was not as addressed. We are way more accepting of the idea that a physical injury needs a doctor and needs support or physiotherapy. The mental injury is so invisible, so the relatability can sometimes be lost, and we're not as able to kind of show up or know what to do in terms of how to support someone. And that was really obvious to me in that situation, because I had people who was like, oh, you've got a broken leg, okay, well, call me when you're better and back to skiing, and I wouldn't hear from them again. And then there were the friends that were like, oh, you're not able to go for a walk or go skiing or do these things. It's like, let me sit with you and have tea, and we'll still connect in this way. And that was like, that's supportive as well, just that presence where it allows you to be a human being instead of a human doing.
And you mentioned that some people came forward to talk to you about their experiences. Did you find that was healing or helpful for you mentally? And did they relay that that was helpful for them?
Yeah, I think it was really helpful in terms of normalizing the fact that when we're out there in the mountains, or we do anything, a lot, we're going to have experiences that are not ideal, or that, are outside of what we thought was going to happen. And so to understand that these people I looked up to, people that I saw as like very competent mountain professionals, also had stories of having, made mistakes or having an outcome that was different than what they anticipated, was kind of validating that it's like, yeah, you can have these experiences, but it doesn't mean you're a terrible outdoors person or that you're never going to belong again.
Oh my soul, I'm scared of all but what I know, and everything I don't is urging me. If you were told light from the east, and the prophet by